Karen.
All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's statement of compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. This show is a series that has been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's program is live. We're going to talk about the Network of Global Corporate Control. Thank you to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, Project Director, to Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and to Cruce Starnes, Audio and Prompter. The central banks are part of the Network of Global Corporate Control. Last week, Press TV interviewed me on debt owed by the central banks. YouTube has admitted that there were over 27,000 views, and at last count, there were 420 comments. First, we're going to show you a few minutes from Press TV's interview. $22 trillion is a lot of red ink. This is very true. The question, though, is what is the currency that the debt is in? People say it's in U.S. dollars, but the U.S. dollars are issued by the Federal Reserve Bank, and this currency is not legitimate. It's not constitutional. According to the United States Constitution and the founders, the currency was supposed to be expressed in silver, a fine weight of silver. And paper currency is not silver, and it's no longer convertible into silver or any other precious metals. So this is just fake currency, and that's the problem because there is a lot of corruption coming from this fake currency. But yes, as far as the Federal Reserve note is concerned, we are supposed to pay back the creditors, the people holding our debt, of $22 trillion. This is a lot of red ink. This is talking about the very rapid growth in the Federal Reserve note debt. And under George Bush, who recently died, and under Barack Obama, this debt continued to grow almost exponentially. And the fact of the matter is that this debt is actually bogus. Bogus means fake. It's fake debt. Why do I say it's fake debt? This is because it's owed to the Federal Reserve, which is one of the members of the Bank for International Settlements. Now, this group was supposed to be shut down by the World Bank. That's what we know. And we have been trying to close the Federal Reserve and these members of the Bank for International Settlements down because actually they owe debt. They owe more debt than we owe under the bogus national debt. What do the Federal Reserve and the members of the Bank for International Settlements owe? They owe over $2 quadrillion. That is debt that was issued in the 1930s under something called Treaty of Versailles bonds. At the time, this was $270 trillion, but there was interest that grew exponentially, and now the bankers owe us over $2 quadrillion worth. So the Federal Reserve, it's bankrupt, and I have put liens on the Federal Reserve, and I have recorded these liens, and I have given a notice to the Universal Postal Union, and we are now in the process of winding the Federal Reserve down. Who is we? We is all of the people on Earth. We're in something called the global currency reset. And the chance that we succeed in doing this, it's over 90%. We know this from, this is a power transition model from the National War College that came to me in 2004. And it's very, very accurate, and I've been following this. This power transition model tells us who is working together in a coalition, and I can tell you who is in this coalition. It's the people all over the world and the military powers all over the world, including the United States military powers. We're talking about the amount
Next week, we are going to answer questions from Andy's group and some of your questions from the comments in the archives on YouTube. In the remaining time today, I'm going to update you how Ghana's former Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, now the chair of the Joint Ministerial Committee of the Boards of Governors of the Bank and the Fund, Ken Ofori-Atta, he defaulted, along with the Vice President of Latin America and Caribbean region in the World Bank and the former acting managing director of the World Bank, Axel van Trotsenburg, and John Gandolfo, who was the World Bank's acting treasurer, and Pascale Dubois, who headed the World Bank's Institutional Integrity Department, and Yvonne Tsikata, who was secretary of the World Bank, and Osvaldo Graacos, who was its ombudsman, and 3 other officials in the World Bank's corrupt secretariat. These corrupt officials broke the Articles of Agreement of the World Bank, and they defaulted on a commercial lien that I have placed on all of their assets. I served these officials with my statements about how they are harming and defrauding the world's people and preventing the conversion of the world's corrupt paper currencies into currencies minted out of the world's monetary gold reserves that Jose Rizal deposited with the World Bank at the end of World War II. These corrupt officials are defrauding everyone on Earth, and they're holding up the global currency reset. If you wonder what is wrong in the world, you don't have to look any further than these corrupt people. We are shaming them in front of the entire world. Now, in the teleprompter, I've put screenshots proving these statements. People who have been following us since this series began are going to understand the significance of many of the documents that I've posted. Newbies may want to find other interested people who are going to put the pieces of the puzzle together with you. I worked for more than 20 years in the World Bank's legal department, and I started reporting corruption at the World Bank. I later reported the corruption to the World Bank's oversight agencies, like the U.S. Congress. The day before we went on air, I posted some of my reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission and to the Dutch government about this corruption. These reports are also at the end of the teleprompter for today's segment. I publish this information on the internet, and I give links on Twitter, Facebook, and on my website. These are also uploaded along with today's segment in the archives on YouTube. You can find the link to the teleprompter by clicking on the button in the first YouTube archive section. The corrupt people in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund Secretariat are going to be bankrupted. That's for starters. Stay tuned. I've also reposted the teleprompter for last month's segment about the CIA and also for the DCTV segment in April last year when we broke through the censorship. What was the banking cartel trying to censor? The banking cartel tried to hide the fact that the people who have wronged us should feel thoroughly ashamed. They should know better. They need to understand that all of this information is ultimately going to come available in the global currency reset. These people need to start as soon as possible to make amends, and we are all going to take into account, starting from last year in April, what they have done. And now I'm going to speak extemporaneously. One of the reasons that I do this is because we are in a relationship. I have to be credible to you. You have to be able to vouch for what I say. And I've learned, people have told me, that I'm not very convincing when I read from a teleprompter. The reason, of course, that I write the teleprompter is because I need to be very clear, and also because there's been interference in the broadcasts. So when you've got the teleprompter, you can go ahead and read, and sometimes YouTube turns the volume down. So if you're having difficulties hearing, you can just read what the script is in the teleprompter. But as I said, I now speak extemporaneously, and that's because I need to convince you. And the most important thing is that you need to convince yourselves, because there are a lot of things that don't add up. And some of you are better at figuring this out. It's not your fault, but there's weaponry that's making it very difficult for people who are sensitive to this weaponry to reason for themselves. It's as if they've been hypnotized. And if you're one of the people who's not so sensitive to this weaponry, then what you need to do is you need to learn how to interact with people who are hypnotized. And the way to do this is to realize that they're not hearing you. And if you try to confront them, you're not going to get anywhere, because it's as if they're asleep. And for those of you who are able to function, you need to find other people who are not as sensitive to this weaponry, and you need to start talking to each other. And one of the reasons that you need to do this is because these people, they should be people who know you very well. These people are going to point out to you when you're doing things that don't really seem as if you're making any sense. It's because when you're hypnotized, you really don't understand that you're hypnotized. But if somebody points out to you that you're not being very consistent, that's a way for you to function. And I know this because obviously I've been dealing with this weaponry, and I've learned how to function, and that's the way to do it. Also, when you're in one of these groups and you're trying to help each other, the people that are targeting you are not going to, they're going to realize that their weaponry is not so very functional. Now, I'm repeating myself. One of the reasons that I do this is because some of you are just tuning in for the first time, and I need to reach you with the most important information. But for the people who get turned off by the fact that I'm repeating myself. If you look in the teleprompter, you'll see an update of where we are. And let me explain to you where we are. We're actually at the very turning point, because when I've bankrupted these officials at the World Bank was created at the end of World War II. I say the World Bank, I'm also talking about the International Monetary Fund. They were created because they're a cooperative of all the world's people, and this is a way for us to organize ourselves as we transition. And it's going to take us a very, very long time, because this corruption that we're now looking at and defeating, first of all, the chances that we defeat this corruption are over 90%, but this corruption has been in place, we know, for over 9,000 years. If you go back to 9200 BC, which is the date of the oldest pyramid in Egypt, that's when the corruption began, and it may have even begun before then. So it's been in place for a very long time, and we know that we're in the middle of a transition. We started to transition actually at the end of World War II, which is when the assets of the world were put into a special trust, and they were put into this trust by Jose Rizal, and his lawyer was Ferdinand Marcos. And the significance of the 50 years is because of a concept called the statute of limitations. After 50 years, if you haven't won your case, you don't have a case anymore. That's because there are no living witnesses that can testify on your behalf. So we have kept these assets for more than 50 years, and so anybody who's claiming these assets, they've lost their opportunity, because the statute of limitations is barring them. So these assets are now vested. We have clear title to them, and we is all the world's people of the world, and the military powers of the world, they know very well. And one of the reasons that they know very well is that they saw what happened when there was a planned first nuclear strike against Russia. That was in 2015, and that was thwarted. And there was also an attempt to nuke the United States in 2013 in October 8th. And so the military and the people who didn't follow the orders, and instead they exploded the nuke off the coast of Charleston, and Heather Cole refused the first strike against Russia. These officials were punished, and we're going to make sure ultimately that they're recognized as the heroes and heroine that they actually are. But in the meantime, the military understood that this was a travesty, and so they've been organizing themselves, and they've been watching, and they've been listening to see how all the people of the world transition peacefully, and that's what we're about to do. And it's not going to happen suddenly. It's going to happen very slowly, and the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to be changing this corrupt currency for real currency, and that's going to be issued by villages and towns. Each village and each town, the people that are providing services and goods in those towns are going to have a barter system that they agree to among themselves, and all of the countries are going to be issuing the gold that's on deposit in the World Bank and IMF, and they're going to be minting this currency. It's going to handle just like paper bills, but it's going to be, the gold is going to be pressed very thin. And if there's a country that would rather not have the gold issued to them, they have, for example, their own mines, and they want to issue their own currency, that's well and good. They can certainly do that. They want to issue currency in some of their agricultural products. That's fine. We're not going to prevent them from doing this. But they're going to be given the monetary gold reserves that belong to their people. So, and that's going to be issued to them as a matter of course. But we have to set the systems up so that none of this gold goes missing. It's going to take us quite some time, but we're not in any rush. And the reason why we're not in a rush is because there's not going to be any reason to rush. We are in possession of the world's assets, and we're going to organize ourselves peacefully. And many people say, well, when is all of this going to happen? The word is peacefully, and not enough people really know what we're up to. So we can't move until enough people know. And that's really up to you. You have to start convincing people. There are a number of people who have been working on this already. And you're going to be hearing next week from some of these people. And you're hearing from me. I'm the spokesperson for this coalition. The reason that we know that this coalition exists is because of very accurate technology that comes from the National War College. It's something called the Power Transition Model that came to me in 2004. And you could also look at the teleprompter for next week's segment. And there I've got a piece of information that talks about how we know that this software from the National War College is very, very accurate. So there's this coalition that exists that is in reality. And we know that this is the reality, the new reality, because reality is actually a little bit different than we're used to. Part of the reason that a lot of this is sounding very strange to you is because all of the universities and most of the media have been given the role of speaking for the banking cartel. These central banks that I was talking about in the beginning of the broadcast. Well, they've been deliberately misleading you. So you're going to have to start decoupling from this disinformation. And you're going to have to start learning about what the actual facts are. And you don't have to worry about things that you don't want to be a specialist in. Now, I studied in law school. I'm a trained lawyer, but I had to learn to step out of the actual training that I was given because it turned out that I was brainwashed. And when we were talking in the beginning about commercial liens, this is under something called the common law. That's a very old legal system. It goes back to the Middle Ages in the United Kingdom. There are a number of countries that are under the common law. And that's the system of law that we're going to be switching to. We're not going to be following any of the courts or any of the existing lawyers because they've all been working for the bankers. And the bankers have been, they've been lying to you. But it turns out that the bankers are not the ones that own the world's wealth. It's all of humanity. And we're going to be dealing with our wealth. And the way we're going to deal with it is we're going to be putting it in our currencies. And also the local communities are going to be issuing their currencies. And we're not going to do anything very sudden because if you know anything about economics, when you try to do things suddenly, there's what you call a multiplier effect. What that is that people buy things, and those people that have bought things turn around and use the money to buy something else. So if we were to try to do something very sudden in cleaning up the money, we would be victims of the multiplier effect. And we don't want to have a sudden collapse of the economies. So we're going to work very seamlessly. We're going to keep these corrupt paper currencies in circulation until we're able to switch over. And of course, one of the most important transitions is the local currencies, which are all going to be slowly coming on board. there already are some communities that issue local currencies, and they can serve as models. Nobody's going to tell your community how you have to issue your currency. You can make this up, or you can copy from existing systems. And how many communities are going to join together, this is going to be up to the communities themselves. That's the whole point. We have to start learning. And one of the other reasons why things are not going to go so quickly is because the old systems are not reliable. It's not just the lawyers that have been serving the banking cartel. It's the accountants, it's the journalists. And so people are going to have to get themselves ready to deal with these different professions themselves in a way. So if anyone ever tells you, well, you have to go ask the experts, you know that those people are trying to confuse you, so you don't listen to that. And you can devise whatever things make it more comfortable for you. And we're all going to be working together to try to figure out where we go from here. I had thought a long time ago that I was going to be able to rely on the existing systems. And no, because what it turns out is that there are things, people that I call gatekeepers, that are in the very center of things, that are trying to make sure that the bankers stay in control. If the bankers were in control for ever since 9200 BC, and they had a chance to put all these gatekeepers in place, then you can see how difficult it's going to be to just accept what you see in the existing, for example, the non-governmental organizations. We're going to have to rebuild from the grassroots up. But some of the things that I've been seeing is that it's not clear exactly how much corruption there is. And so it's not really clear what our steps are going to be in cleaning up this corruption. And we're going to have to work together and take things into account. And I was talking in the program that we're going to be pre-taping for next week about how do we know that we're getting things right. And the point is there's going to be a lot of trial and error. But the first way we're going to know that we're getting things right is because we hear from people when we're getting things wrong. That's one of the things that I learned as a whistleblower, that it was very difficult to criticize some of what I call the muckety-mucks. They were not open to hear what they had done wrong, and they did a lot wrong. So that's how we're going to know that we're actually cleaning up the corruption, because we're going to be hearing when we do things wrong. And it's not going to be easy because, first of all, we have to learn what it is that we've been relying on the professions to do for us. So we're going to have a lot of learning to do. And we're going to have to hear when we're getting things wrong. So it's not going to be comfortable. But then again, we're not going to have any rush. We're going to be able to take our time. And we're going to be building from the grassroots up. And we'll have to see how it goes. Because this kind of cleaning up of corruption has never been done on a world scale before. This is unprecedented. But we have a lot of tools, and so I'm optimistic that we're going to manage. Thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. In this segment, you can see that it's possible to stay out of World War III simply by accepting the gift of love from Jose Rizal, the world's wealth in the global debt facility. It is there for humanity in the global currency reset to clean up the corruption in the world's money system. The global currency reset to end the corruption in our money is such a big transition, it's going to take a while for us to understand the extent of the corruption, and the kind of cleanup that is going to be required. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.